First one's on the temptation of Eve. The question is, when Adam is said to be with Eve at the temptation, does the Hebrew imply or require proximity? Much is made of Adam being passive during the temptation and not fulfilling his headship role. Is this an inference, or does the language require Adam's proximity? The English would not require proximity. The English word with. I can be with someone in my house without being within earshot.
I don't know. I mean, this is a technical question of the Hebrew. My answer is I don't think so. I do not think that the Hebrew is any more certain than the English there. But I'm confessing my ignorance of that. Do you know, Pastor Packer?
I don't think it necessarily requires it, but I think the text, it says making an inference from the text. I think the text is pretty clear, even in the way they're addressed. Like who bears the blame for this is Adam. The picture painted does seem to be that Adam is there almost waiting to see what happens to Eve. And then Eve eats and she doesn't die right away. And so then he eats. And the Bible says she was deceived. I always think that's interesting too, right? Because a lot of people, we look at their responses and we almost make it sound like Eve gives as bad a response as Adam, but it's not true though, because Eve says, I was deceived and I ate. And Paul will later say the same thing, that
Right.
Eve was deceived. So she very clearly was deceived, but Adam was not deceived. He did it full on knowing what he was doing in rebellion against God, which is why he takes the blame for it throughout the Bible. So I think you have lots of evidence throughout the Bible that Adam is seen as the one responsible for all of this. And so being with her proximity wise makes a lot of sense. He didn't step up and do what he should have done. Instead, he almost kind of used her as a guinea pig. That's the way it reads to me. Like, hey, let's see what happens to her. Oh, she didn't die. I guess I can do this too. But he did it full well knowing what he was doing, whereas Eve was, as she said, actually deceived by the serpent, by Satan. So
There's a lot of really important things to meditate on in this text. So, and one of them you mentioned already, that the scriptures all the way through, front to back, blame the fall on Adam. We don't say all mankind fell in Eve's fall. All mankind fell in Adam's fall. Death came through Adam. And we see it also, even in the temptation itself, that it's when Adam eats that their eyes are open, not when Eve eats. And this has to do with, I mean, Paul mentions it when he's talking about women not being pastors, and Eve was tempted first. She was deceived, but Adam was not. He knew what he was doing. That difference there, the way that Adam and Eve were engaged with the arguments of the devil, that's a really important thing for us to think about as well. That Adam had headship over all of creation, including Eve. So he had a duty there that was being neglected one way or another. I suppose if he was there, he was neglecting it by being passive. If he was in the next room, he was neglecting it by being passive. I mean, either way, there's still some neglect that's happening via Adam. But Luther, when he's reflecting on this, is really interesting, is that Adam and Eve, part of their temptability was their innocence, their supreme innocence. There was no way for them to imagine death. I mean, what is it? But that's maybe the whole point of the tree, is that they were supposed to go to that tree and believe what God said about it, that on the day that you eat of it, dying you'll die. They're to believe that promise of God and not die. They were supposed to have death by faith, not by sight. So their worship was the worship of faith, trusting the word of the promise, and the devil undoes that. The way the devil undoes it is also very interesting. Pastor Packer, I was thinking about, I think I read the temptation wrong for years and years, because there's this little phrase in there that I always skipped over, almost like it wasn't even there, when the devil's talking. And so it's Genesis 3, and the devil says, this is verse 4, the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." And the phrase that I missed for so many years was, "for God knows." that on the day you eat of it. And I think that's so important because we think the devil was mostly interested in what Adam and Eve thought about the fruit. Was it going to kill them or not? But actually, the devil's most interested in what Adam and Eve think about God, or maybe even more, what Adam and Eve think about what God thinks about them. You see? So the root of this temptation is for Adam and Eve to think that God doesn't want what's right or best for them. Rather, his commands are motivated by his own self-interest rather than love for Adam and Eve. God knows that you won't die. So the devil impugns the motives of God in giving that restriction. And that's where that real sort of poison of unbelief comes in there, is that we also are tempted to doubt that God, with his commands, actually intends the best for us. So,
And I think there's often confusion about the knowing good and evil, because throughout the Bible that phrase is used for wisdom, right? Solomon is praised because he asked to know the difference between good and evil, meaning to be a wise king and ruler and judge, which is what God was telling them to wait on. They weren't ready yet to rule and reign fully the way God intended them to. There's a testing period, a maturity period, and they tried to grab hold of that and get it out of order because Satan's temptation. Hey, you can be better than you are, and God knows that, but God had said, hey, you got to wait on this. This isn't time for you yet. And if you look at David was tempted with the same thing on multiple occasions, right? With Saul. Are you going to wait on the Lord's timing for you to become king and to be given what God promised you? Or are you going to take matters into your own hands, right? Several times his men encourage him, hey, here's your chance. Take him out now. And David says, I can't do that. He's the Lord's anointed. I won't touch him. Like, God knows when I'm supposed to be king, what the timing is. And so you see David being the opposite of Adam there. He waits for God's timing until God raises him up and puts him where he's supposed to be. Whereas Adam rushed headlong into it. And we know how that worked out for the rest of us.
can you imagine if David was a Pentecostal, by the way? I mean, how more clearly could you have gotten a sign from the Lord? I mean, here's Saul. You're hiding in a cave, and Saul comes to go to the bathroom right in front of you. and you're like, or the Lord puts all the men to sleep so that you can sneak in and grab the jug that's by his head. It's a sign from the Lord. And David just didn't believe in the signs. He believed the word. It's amazing.
And that's a theme throughout. I mean, going back to the garden, right? It's a theme throughout the Bible. Those who trust the word of promise, and those who don't, right? Yep. That's the way the battle lines are drawn up throughout the Bible. Do you trust what God actually said and gave to you, or are you going to try to take matters into your own hands and do it your way?
How about the Psalm of the humiliation of Jesus, Psalm from Philippians 2, as the anti-Garden of Eden temptation. So it says, who did not consider equality with God as something to be grasped, but made himself of low estate, so that Jesus didn't reach out and grasp likeness of God. In fact, in that text, look, I say it and I get the goosebumps on my hand. Just look at that Philippians 2 text. It says that he came in the likeness of man. So that God first creates Adam and Eve in his own likeness, and we blow it. We take the likeness of Adam, the likeness of death. But then Jesus comes he makes himself into our likeness. Oh, it's amazing. So that he can rescue us. Whew. Anyway, good question. I don't think we answered it, but it was a good chance to talk about the fall, the temptation. There's a lot there.
I think we got close enough. All right.